This week, we've seen perilous prophecies, governmental gaffes, and immortal ideologies. Let's dive right into what's on the pull list. Alright, kicking things off this week, we're going to start with Assorted Crisis Events number 8, written by Dennis Camp with artwork by Eric Zawadzki. So, I usually tried to provide some kind of summation of the issue to kind of lock things in, right, and get everyone prepared for the review. But this one kind of deserves a blind eye because, to be honest, you're part of it, even if you don't know that you're necessarily part of the book reading experience. So, this kind of could have been the top pick contender of the week, right? This is an easy book to be able to recommend to anyone because it just plays with the ideas of comics and there's such a meta nature behind it. There's just so many ideas that are being toyed with here within the guise of a comic, viewing a comic maker who's living in a comic. It gets like so meta on layer upon layer upon layer. In that same vein, though, Zawadzki gets to go bigger than I think he's ever gone before, which says a lot, considering a lot of the praise of this book has gotten from its artistic approach. Some of the landscapes, some of the layouts, the panel work. Zawadzki is just bringing a flair and I don't know, a thought process to the book that really a lot of books right now aren't bringing. There's so much flair, in fact, that I feel like I got real big vibes of Mazzucchelli in this book, particularly for Mysterios Polyp. So if you've read that book, you might know what I'm maybe pointing out here. All in all, though, this was such a fantastic journey. This is definitely a contender for my favorite issue amongst this anthology series so far. I can't recommend it enough. Next up, we have Briar Night Terror number 2, written by Chris Cantwell with artwork by Alex Linz. So in this issue, Briar Rose learns a little bit more about her lineage, right? Where she has come from, while the decision is made to really kind of embrace her heroism as opposed to remaining in the shadows. There's a bit of reluctance amongst our heroes that kind of lead to bloodshed and regret in this issue. There's the decision that's been made, and in the previous issue, right, the kickoff of this mini series that is the finale, we got to see that, our heroes were kind of living in peace, albeit they were doing so by not being the heroes that they were meant to be. I'm ready for the head to head. I want that face off between the fairy godmother and Briar Rose so that we can kind of get a little bit of finality on this. I'm kind of like waited on bated breath for this kind of thing to happen. What I can say in this is that there is a prophecy, right? There's been a prophecy that's been overarching throughout this entire series. Well, there is part of that prophecy that is overwhelmingly being pushed forward in this issue. And I really appreciate that because that thing that I want is definitely being pushed to the forefront within this. So there's no avoiding it at this point here. Unfortunately, some of the things that happen to our characters here, the decision making does lead to some bloodshed, right? There's no avoiding it. There's no getting around it. But I think it's doing so in a effort to push that narrative forward here, and I gotta say I appreciate that. Over at the House of Ideas, we have Captain America number 6, written by Chip Zdarsky with artwork by Delio Diaz and Frank Alpizar. So Cap is having this crisis of purpose, right? And crisis in finding a place for himself in the world, all as both the US government and a newly formed shield are, kind of trying to seek his guidance, seek his assistance in, figuring out the solution for the Latveria problem now that Doctor Doom is gone. And I get the impression that we're building up right now. So the fact that Steve Rogers' mental peril has been traversed before isn't necessarily totally grating against me. Like I said, it's been done before, but I feel like it's also very fitting in the purpose behind this book. The art here is also top notch. I was so pleasantly surprised by it. It fits very well in the stylistic choices that Valerio Schiti had done with the start of this book. I kind of was just, like I said, surprised by this. I dove back into Captain America because it feels like Zdarsky's version, right? His view of the Marvel Universe is what is going to be shaping what we get from Marvel in 2026. And I want to be along for the ride. I want to understand where we're going along with this. And it feels like Captain America is the jumping off point. Maybe it could be the catalyst for all this kind of thing happening. If that's the case, I have to say, it fit the bill, right? It was a pleasant surprise here. I can't say it was the best comic of the week, but when it comes to Marvel and my feelings towards them, I gotta say it's been much better than most of the things I've gotten. All right, let's talk Daredevil Punisher, The Devil's Trigger number 3, written by Jimmy Palmiotti with artwork by Tommaso Bianchi. So Matt uncovers the reason as to why these criminals are getting back on the street, right? Way earlier than we have expected here. And he needs to figure out how to keep them out of the Punisher's crosshairs all the time. So I like the gritty artistic approach that this book is providing here. It feels like something that's kind of outside of the I don't know, the Marvel house style, right? It feels like they're not staying too timid in their artistic approach on that. And I appreciate it because it's something different, right? It's something exciting that we don't normally get. All in all, though, this is a cool feeling Daredevil story. It's Punisher light. He's in the title, but he's like very much not in the book. I don't think that Palmiotti ever planned on making him being the Punisher a character so much as like he kind of views a Punisher as like a fuse to be lit. That's kind of like what we get from that character approach here. So this is very much a Daredevil centric story here with Punisher kind of being the thing that's going to kick all of the activities off here. So I dig it. It's pretty good. And in being a Daredevil fan, I got to say, I just appreciate getting a worthwhile Daredevil story here. All right, let's talk Fantastic Four number 7, written by Ryan North with artwork by Humberto Ramos. So Sue has become this intergalactic target, and there's a bounty that's put on her head. So the FF are suiting up, they're on the run, but before they do that, they need to kind of reach out to some friends and call in some favors, right? Because if they're leaving Earth, someone's got to stay behind to protect it. So I'm peeking back into this series again, much like I did on Captain America here, but I'm doing so at the suggestion of Stu from Doctor Doom's fan club. Make sure you go check out his channel and sub up. And this was a well done story about the interconnectivity between the Fantastic Four, Marvel's first family, and some of the people that they trust the most. It was a really, really heartfelt story about family in a lot of different forms, whether it's the family that you're born into or your chosen family. The issue didn't ask a lot artistically from Humberto Ramos by way of like action and bombast. It was a very slow, very methodical book that like kind of like relied more on the conversations than big boldness. But Ramos brought the emotion with each character. So I got to say, I really enjoyed that. Part of my gripes with Ryan North's initial kickoff of Fantastic Four was the artistic duties. Having Ramos on this book is definitely an uptick from what we got previously. So I think that this is becoming an overall better book through and through. I'm deciding whether or not I'm going to stick around, though. The one and done nature, while I kind of like it, it also didn't deliver, I guess, what I was looking for an overarching story. I don't know. I'm on the fence with this one here. Let me know in the comments down below. Should I follow along with this one? I'll follow your lead. All right, let's talk Liquidators number 3, written by Peter Milligan with artwork by Peter Kowalski. So our previous liquidator, Hawksmoor, continues his conquest through otherworldly means this time, while our current liquidator finds herself right in his crosshairs. So those unearthly or otherworldly means here, he's diving into some demonic satanic rituals, right? He is kind of like looking for things outside of the realm of science to lure our main character into his trap. And it's kind of cool seeing that different ideas are being played with here. There's a lot of build up here with no release though in the story. The characters they're learning things that the readers already knew, so it's building up a lot of tension now that everyone is in the know about the activities that are happening here, but I feel like the plot needs that nudge forward. Overall, this issue, it really looked exactly how it needed to, right? From Kowalski's point of view, menacing. So kudos to the effectiveness, right, between the narrative and the artistic duties on this. I feel like they melded in perfectly. I want to see where this is going. Like I said, I feel like this is a slow creep, but it kind of keeps building up that tension as we get each and every issue. All right, over at Ghost Machine, we have Redcoat number 16, written by Jeff Johns with artwork by Brian Hitch. So our boy Einstein is back, and that generally means one thing for Simon, that trouble is brewing, and it's usually by way of some kind of magical force. This one was a zinger, man. It genuinely surprised me as to where it went. This very easily could have been like Immortal Fight number 2, Electric Boogaloo, but it wasn't. It was something kind of big, something bold, surprising, and I really like that out of Jeff Johns and our characters that we've gotten here. We get characters from the past that we thought were already done with, right? But now the past is catching up with Simon, and it's being done so in a way that I didn't anticipate seeing through and through. And I would be willing to bet that we don't know the full story of what's happening here either. Hitch's expressive faces are just so essential for this book, right? Especially with issues like this that thrive off of the emotional resonance of each character. This was a very conversational issue, similar to some of the other books that I had talked about. It was all about the narration, it was all about the conversation, and you need to see the emotion on each person's face to really fully get the feeling that all of these characters are having. So, kudos to the team for that. I think that it was outstanding work here, and it gets me really excited for where this book is going to go. Next up, let's talk Speed Racer Tales from the Road #2, written by Derek Acosta, Richard Hamilton, and Joseph Sirica, with artwork by Travis Heimel, Pablo Andres, and Butch Mappa. So, with that many names attached, you have to anticipate that this is a compilation. I gotta say, though, it was a fun compilation where we get to see the beginnings of the Racers family through Pop's eyes. We get a look into how far Dante Furno will go just to win. And we get a day in the life of a racer outside of the Speed family, too, by the name of Powers. This was pretty good. Far from essential, right? But that's kind of the point. This doesn't need to be essential. In fact, it shouldn't be essential. This should be a nice change of pace. It's a downshift, if you will, from the proper book, where that proper book is pedal to the metal. Artwork is definitely like fitting the bill for each one of these unique stories, the independent stories that we're getting here. And it brings its own unique flair without, also being jarring to those artistic changes as we get from each particular story that's delivered here. I really dug that there was, I don't know, a through line between all of it that felt like we were living within the same universe, albeit, again, unique stories that were being delivered here. Tales from the Road is kind of just like a fun speed racer book. Again, it's another one of those examples where there's this licensed property that I had no background in that I'm just having a lot of fun with. This is another great book that's kind of like, I don't know, luring me further into the speed racer universe. All right, with one of our first finales of the Ultimate Universe, let's talk Ultimate Black Panther #24, written by Brian Hill with artwork by Stefano Caselli. So T'Challa, he meets the progenitors on the astral plane to strike some kind of negotiation that he knew could never actually happen. But in doing so, he bought himself the time that is needed to put Wakanda's affairs in order and maybe figure out his plan for what it means to be part of Wakanda and the ruler of Wakanda. It was a unique endpoint of the series, right? We spend 99% of the time within T'Challa's inner monologue as he kind of lays out Wakanda's survival plans, his own ultimate sacrifice, and everything that has kind of been brought to a boiling point within the series proper. With that being said, though, this only ends to allow the story to continue in Ultimate Endgame. So I don't know. It kind of makes me curious how much time is really going to be devoted to this story, right? And how much they're really going to deliver the finality for some of these characters that we've been through for 24 issues now. So it's kind of interesting. This feels, we know it's the ending, but it doesn't feel like an ending, and it very much leaves I guess dangling story threads. So I don't know. It makes me curious. Ultimate Endgame is already kicked off. We know that we're getting some parts of it over there, but we haven't actually seen the Ultimate Black Panther characters. Time will tell, I guess. This was a really good issue. I think it was actually one of the strongest series of the Ultimate line so far, but we need more. We need just a little bit more. And with my runner up pick of the week, let's talk the Power Fantasy #15, written by Kieran Gillen with artwork by Casper Wingard. So, as Eliza is coping with her hellish existential crisis, the remaining atomics cope with the metaphorical doomsday clock that's ticking ever closer to midnight. And who, Gillen, you lulled me into this false sense of security. The last issue was a bit quieter, right? I anticipated that slow build towards the end of the arc, which is issue number 16. Nope. Forget that idea because that's definitely not what happens here. This feels like the second to last Jenga block being pulled, and the trepidatious stability. So it's, I don't know, that the stability is like so finite, right? It's just dangling by a thread here. But in a book like this, it's all about the super powered egomaniacs that are being delivered in this book, and that's what kind of like drives everything that's going on with it. It's just beautiful. It's just so engrossing, right? I don't know. There's something about this book that draws you in such a beautiful way, and it's all about these character motivations. These are all imperfect people so clearly, and I feel like stability has been drawn out issue after issue. Like I said, with that Jenga block metaphor, that we are just like that tower right now is getting ready to tip, and it gets me so excited for the next issue. It's going to be absolutely great. I just know it. Make sure you're checking out Power Fantasy. And with my top comic of the week, let's talk Everything Dead and Dying #5, written by Tate Bromble with artwork by Jacob Phillips. So everything Jack has built, right, for himself, for his family, for the town, has been torn down. Every tradition ripped away, and there's absolutely nothing he can do about it. I'm not sure that a comic has hit me this hard in quite a bit. There was a beautiful and brutal and just incredibly difficult story that's been told here by Tate Bromble, and they've really crafted just a hell of a story. It was so incredible, and the way that it ends is it just elevates the rest of the story so much. There's part of this where Jack is, I don't know, he's thinking upon a story that he wishes he could have shared with his daughter, and I'll be honest, that part of the story just wrecked me. Did I shed tears in this as I read it? Yes, I did. And Phillips' artwork, by the way, I haven't even mentioned Jacob Phillips' artwork here. It really brought this book to life. Ha, pun intended. I'm really curious to see whose idea it was to frame certain pages with the traditional 9-panel grid, as those pages bounce back and forth between, events of the past and, events that are playing out in the current time frame, and the hope and the dreams and the best times in life juxtaposed with the brutality and the remorse and the just everything that's happening in the world right here and right now, as again everything's being torn apart. This really evolved into something that was special. This could have been a zombie book, and this is so much more than a zombie book. This is something to behold. It's heartbreaking though. It is absolutely heartbreaking here. But again, like any kind of great media, whether it's music, with television, movies, comic books, they are supposed to make you feel something. And I gotta say, when it comes to the effectiveness of making me feel something, this book not only takes top notch for this week, but definitely so far this year, and probably for a good long time here. So, Everything Dead and Dying was absolutely worthy of top comic of the week. So that's what I've got for you this week, but I'm more curious. What did you read, and what were your thoughts? Do me a favor, like, share, subscribe, and consider being part of a membership here on 9-Panel Grid and be part of the panel. Leave me a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching. We'll talk to you next week.